Hi, I had a question about this process of taking this guitar that we're drawing and turning it and compressing it to give it that three-dimensional, three-quarter view. And it's one of those things that's simple if you've done it. If you haven't, then it's probably kind of challenging. So let me just walk through the steps here. I have my guitar, which I've drawn, or traced rather, from a good reference photo, and all the components are there. So I'm going to grab the whole thing, make sure I've got everything together. And then I can use the bounding box to just rotate this thing about, let's say about there. Or I can use the rotate tool and just option click in the drawing area and then plug in the amount of rotation that I want. I found that for this project, minus 50 degrees is about what we want, so you're welcome to try that if you want. And then once it's turned, we can use the bounding box to just scale it upwards, right about there, or use the scale tool, click, and with the shift key down, drag it up. So it's right about there, and now we can start building out some of these side elements to make it look like it's actually a three-dimensional object. And let me just get a little start on that. I'll take the guitar body and click and drag holding down the shift and option keys, and you'll have to, if you're not really sure about this, you'll have to look at some reference and get a sense of about how thick that guitar body is. That looks pretty good to me. And I'm going to add a couple anchor points on the outside edges. Oops. Come on. There we go. And that will give me something to snap these points to as I take this thing apart, this bottom object, and then reconnect it to the top. So just as we did when we were drawing simple cylinders, I'll click on the end point of that open path and come around and close it off. And now I should be able to drag these points up and snap them into place on the face of that guitar. Now I've created this side element. Give that a darker brown. They usually are a darker brown. And I'd like you to use the gradient tool to apply a little gradient to this and really make it look like it's three-dimensional and pick up some of the highlights in these curves. I'm not going to bother with that right now. Now, these elements on the top, this is the bridge, a little slab of wood, and this fingerboard is another thin slab of wood. Those elements sit on top of that guitar, so I'm going to raise them up a little bit. Actually, what I'll do is take the other elements and lower them a little bit, the sound hole and the pickguard and the guitar body itself, and I'm just going to bump those down a little. And now we can take these elements, the bridge, which as I said is a little slab of wood, and Command C, Command B will place a copy behind, and now bump that down just a couple steps with the arrow keys on my keyboard, and add an anchor point here and here. And now I can snap that to the corner. I'll have to guess where that is, and make it a little darker, give it a sense of a shadowed edge. And now it looks a little bit like a three-dimensional little slab of wood, which is exactly what it is. These little round buttons here are usually, on most acoustic guitars, they're a little round pin. So those will have to be redrawn as little round circles. That would be fine. And use these existing ellipses just to help you place those in the right spot. But 6 little round white or cream-colored spheres right there would do the trick. This pickguard is now sitting in front of that bridge. It's not supposed to, so we'll move that back. I'll let you move that back when you do yours. Now we can work on the fingerboard, which is another slab of wood. Select that. Let me bump that stroke down a little bit to 5 points. Again, Command C, Command B We'll place a copy behind and use the arrow key just to nudge that down. A couple steps should do it. Zoom in here, and we'll add an anchor point once again and bring that up. And now it looks like it's a flat piece of wood with a little bit of thickness to it. And while I'm doing this, let me just show you a little trick. Because this has a thick stroke and it's a very acute angle here, if we select that and give these strokes rounded corner points, that'll eliminate that little extra point that's sticking out and makes it look a little neater. And now I just want to zoom in and grab this piece, which is the headstock, and actually we'll grab the headstock and the little ellipses which show where those finger tuning posts are. And we'll drop this down a little bit because it does sit behind and beneath that fingerboard. And add a point here. And bring that up and adjust the thickness on this headstock. And now this, of course, like everything else, is three-dimensional. It has a thickness. So we'll bring a piece down and we can send that to the back. Or actually, I'll do what I've been doing with these other things. Command C, Command B, and then just bump that down a bit. And add points here and here. And now it has a little bit of thickness. And there's actually a thicker piece of wood, the guitar neck itself, which this fingerboard sits on top of. And we can create this just by clicking on this open point. And that attaches to that guitar body. And it looks a little bit like that. Again, you'll have to look at some photos of guitars if you're not familiar with exactly how this thing is put together. There's my wife. Part of the job is doing some research and figuring out how all these elements go together. So that's pretty much what we're after. These little ellipses represent the places where little metal posts sit up and these strings wrap around them. You don't actually have to go through and wrap those strings around, just draw the strings coming up to those posts. That would be fine. That kind of detail, probably something that wouldn't even really show up when this thing is reproduced. I mean, you're welcome to take it that far if you want. And there's my phone. Sorry about the distractions. And the other thing we need to add, and this is something we've done a few times before, is create these tuning knobs. These are actually knobs that you tune to raise and lower the pitch on those strings. And oops. They're actually attached to the back of that headstock. So we'll start with one little tuning knob just by making a little cylinder. Something like that. And that would rest right about there. And actually there's a metal rod that attaches it on the back side of that headstock, so we can draw in a little suggestion of a metal rod and place it like that. Something like that. And then once you've drawn one, we can duplicate that. couple of times. And move those little pieces to the back to make it look like they're actually attached to the back of that headstock, and then there'd be 3 corresponding tuning knobs on the other side. And in reality, they all tune independently, so they wouldn't normally all be at the same angle, but for our purposes, it's fine if you want to just copy them and leave them like that. So, tuning knobs, add a little metal post here cylinder to indicate that the post where the strings wrap, and I think we're just about done. It looked like people had a good start on this. I don't see any value in just trying to work on this thing when you don't know what you're doing and you're frustrated and you just don't know the next step. I don't mind people working hard. I want you to work hard and make progress, but if you're at a point where you're just banging your head against the wall, I'd rather have you stop and come into class and let me know where you got stuck, and we'll figure it out. This is complex in that it's a lot of steps repeated over and over again, but there's nothing here that we haven't done before. But if you do reach a point where you're not quite sure how to pull something off, as I say, don't tear your hair out. Just come into class and we'll talk about it tomorrow. Thanks a lot.